Friday. Welcome to this week's live, where I will be sharing 10 tips for mass producing cards. My name is Sherry Ruff. I'm a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator from Alberta, Canada. Today, whether you are making 10 cards or 100 cards, these tips will come in handy. And it doesn't have to be necessarily all cards that are exactly the same. Um, Maybe you want to stock up on some birthday cards and thank you cards. If you choose a simple design that can be used for any occasion, you can restock your stash of cards so that you have them ready to go when you need them. All right. So today I'm going to be making 6 cards. I want to make, I need to make, let me think about this here. I need to make 4 congratulations cards, and I'm going to make 2 thank you cards. So I'm going to use the same card design, and along the way, I'll be sharing tips on how to design your cards and how to simplify the process. All right. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I appreciate you being here. Make sure that you say hi in the comments and let me know where you're watching from. It's always fun to see where you're watching from. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So, tip number one for mass producing your cards is to choose a simple design. So, choose something that looks good, but it's easy to reproduce. Okay, and I like to turn to sketches when I do this for mass production because sketches are great. It gives me a starting point. That doesn't mean you necessarily have to stick with the sketch, but it gives you somewhere to start. So, today we're going to use this sketch right here. I know it's hard to see, but so it's got your base and then it's got a larger piece in the center with a strip going across and another little strip on top. So I'll share my interpretation of that. And this is also part of my summer sketch challenge or share, where I'm going to share different ways that I use sketches over the course of the summer. All right, so we're going to use that. So that is tip number one. So choose a simple design, something that looks good and easy to reproduce. Tip number two is to make one of the cards first. I really encourage you to do this because sometimes what we think is going to be easy ends up being super time consuming and not as simple as we thought. So I encourage you to make, once you choose a design, make it, see how it looks, make sure that you get all the kinks worked out before you move on. Okay? So this is the card that I created. All right. It's beautiful. It's a simple design. It follows that sketch. And I created one of them. I actually created 2 of them just to make sure that it was a simple card and easy to reproduce. All right. So that was tip number two. Tip number three, limit your supplies. You don't necessarily need a ton of things to make a card. You can make a beautiful card with very few supplies. So I have chosen, I've got my cardstock out here. We're going to cut, score, we're going to do everything. The only thing I pre-did was I pre-tied some ribbon and I also did my embossing with this embossing folder. So I've chosen embossing folder, I've chosen my colors of cardstock, and I chose some pattern paper. Okay. And I'll walk you through I'll have a full supply list of what I'm using in the description as well. So limit your supplies. That's tip number three. Tip number four is to maximize your supplies. Okay, so when I say that, what I mean is if you're using a piece of 12 by 12 pattern paper, divide it or choose a measurement that divides evenly into your piece. So 12 by 12, use a 3 by 4 inch piece or a 4 by 4 inch piece or a 2 by 4 inch piece or a 2 by 5 inch piece. So something that is evenly divisible into a 12 by 12. This will stretch your supplies. You won't have any scraps left. And it's just a great way to use those supplies. Okay. So that is that. And we are going to actually use that tip, but not on a piece of designer series paper. We're going to use that tip on this piece of cardstock. So this is using a brand new embossing folder, the Sunflower 3D embossing folder, which is just released July 1st. It's part of the online exclusives section of the Stampin' Up! Website. And look at this folder. It is absolutely stunning. I love, love, love this folder. and it is a large folder, so it embosses 6 by 8. So I cut my piece of Darling Duckling cardstock down so that it was 6 by 8. So this was a full sheet. So this and then these two strips. I'll share how I cut it here. Oh, this way and this way. So this, I cut it at 6 inches and then cut it at 8 inches. And I embossed this entire piece. And then this leftover piece, I cut it down to 8 and I embossed that piece. And you'll see how we get 6 cards out of this. And we end up with some extra pieces to decorate the inside of our card. Okay. So because this is 6 by 8, I thought, okay, how can I strategically use this piece? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it down the middle at 3 inches and then across at 4 inches. So my pieces are going to be 3 by 4. I get 4 out of 1 pass through the die cutting machine. Okay. So that is another tip, is to try to think about ways that you can use your product so you're not embossing a whole bunch or die cutting a whole bunch of pieces. So because I chose a pattern or an embossing folder that was a little bit larger, I can do one pass through and it gives me enough for 4 cards. Okay, rather than cutting it down first into 3 by 4 and then running it through. Okay, so that was tip number 4. Um, Tip number 5 is avoid difficult measurements. Like, and I'm guilty of this. I use a 16th of an inch and an eighth of an inch, but when I'm mass producing, I want simple measurements: 3 by 4, 3 1/4 by 4 1/4, half an inch by 4 inches. None of this 3/8 of an inch by 3 1/8 of an inch. So none of those measurements. Use simple measurements, and that way it's going to make your cutting process a lot faster. All right, let's see here. Tip number 6, use pre-cut card bases to save time. Okay, so one of the things that Stampin' Up! Carries is note cards and envelopes. So these come pre-cut and scored. You get them in a package of 20 pre-cut card bases and 20 envelopes. They are a little bit smaller. I think they measure 3.5 by 5, yeah, 3.5 by 5 inches. They are mailable, but um, they're a time saver, so you don't have to cut and score. However, you don't always want a smaller card base, so my suggestion is take a piece or a package, or even half a package if you don't make a ton of cards, or even a quarter package of the cardstock colors that you use most often, and score and cut those to have them ready. So I do this with my thick basic white and some of my more common colors that I use for card bases. I use a lot of thick basic white for card bases. So I will often do this with a package or two of thick white cardstock. I cut and score all of my card bases, and then I have a basket that I just keep them in so that they're ready to go when I need to make some cards. It saves me having to do that every time I sit down to craft. All right, we are going to get into crafting. Just bear with me for a minute. I'm going to go through some of these tips. Um, and then I'll talk about the others while we work here. Okay, so tip number 7, reuse layouts and designs that you've used in the past. This saves having to come up with your own design each time. So this card design is one that I've turned to often. I use this card design so often. This could easily be replaced with pattern paper. You could change the size of that pattern paper and still do a strip across it. If you follow me for a long time, you probably recognize this card design. It's a go-to of mine. I use it quite often. You could layer this so you can have a mat in behind to add an extra layer. So there's lots of ways that you can tweak it so that the card doesn't look exactly the same every time you use it. All right. Okay. And then, so that was tip number 7. Tip number 8. Okay, this is where we're going to start to craft. Tip number 8 is to work in batches. And what I mean by that is to do like tasks all together. So do all your cutting first, do all your scoring, do all your die cutting, do all your embossing, do all your stamping, do it in batches. Do not create one card at a time. That takes way too much time. Okay, so we're going to start with that. So just that is tip number 8. So we're gonna work on this first. So what I've got here is I've got 3 pieces of 8.5 by 11 secret C cardstock. That is going to be my card base. So here is another little tip. When you are scoring your cardstock, keep it a full card because you can score 2 cards at once. So I scored it down the middle at 4 1/4, and now I'm rotating it. I'm cutting it a 5. So, and now I've got 2 card bases. So we're going to do that because we're going to make 6 cards today. And then that's what I'm going to do on camera. And then I will make several more cards off camera. I'm doing a combination of congratulations cards for my team and some thank you cards for my customers in July. All right, because why not work smarter, not harder, right? Okay, so my card bases are done. Okay, now I'll set those aside. And now I've got some regular white cardstock and I'm going to cut it. This is going to be for my inside layer because I've got a dark card base. I do need a lighter piece insert to go inside. I'm going to score it. I've got the short end at the top. I'm going not score it. I'm going to cut it at 4 inches all the way down and then rotate it, cut it at 5 1/4. That's usually the size of the layer that I use on the inside of my cards. And then 5 1/4. Okay. And then this 1/2 inch strip, this is what I'm using for that. So that saves having to cut it. So if you think about your card design, you can often use your scraps so that you're not wasting anything and or you're wasting very little and you're saving yourself having to cut extra pieces. Okay, so this is 5 1/4. So we've got another 1/2 inch strip here, and then this is also 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to cut this into 4 inch strips. So this I'm going to toss. You could also save it for a different project. All right, and then we're going to rotate this. We're going to cut it at 5 1/4. Actually, no, we're going to do it at 4 inches because we're making 6 cards. 5 1/4, 5 1/4. I use that, and I'm actually going to cut this down too. Even though 2 of these I'm not going to use in the video, I will use them afterwards. And 5 1/4, just because I need that other strip of 4 inch cardstock. So we're going to save this and these 2 pieces, and this I'm going to set aside. Okay, and then we've got this is our 6 by 8 piece of embossed cardstock. And we are going to cut it. We're going to rotate it. We're going to cut it at 4 inches and then rotate it again, cut it at 3 inches. We're going to do the same for this. This is already 4 inches, so we'll cut this down to 3 inches. And then this piece, so this was a leftover. It's not 6 inches across, so I can't get 4 out of this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it at 3 inches. So I've got the short end at the top and then rotate it and cut it at 4 inches. So there's 2 more. So those are my 6 embossed pieces. I have this piece that is left, and I'm going to cut it at 3/4 of an inch because I think I can get, no, I can't, yeah, but yeah, we're going to cut it at 3/4 of an inch. And then another 3/4. We're going to end up with a 1/2 inch piece left, which is fine. They don't have to be all exactly the same because we're just going to use these on the inside of the card. And then we'll cut this at 4. Those are for the inside. 4 and 4. So I kept these 2 pieces in case I wanted to add those inside. We're not going to end up using those. Okay, and then we need a little bit of pattern paper because I did add a little bit of pattern paper here. So I've got this scrap. This is the Painterly Pears, I believe, DSP. I think that's what it's called. Let me just double check. Yes, Painterly Pears DSP, which is another online exclusive pattern paper that was just released in July. I love this DSP. We're not going to actually use the busier side. We're actually going to use the back side for this particular project. This is already 4 inches, and I'm going to cut some 1/2 inch strips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so this we're not going to end up using. Set that aside. So now we've just done a big batch of cutting all of our supplies. So that is done. So now what we're going to do is we are going to do the next step, and that will be for me, it would be we will be stamping. So the only stamped part on this card, this particular card, because it is a very simple card, is just to stamp a greeting on these white strips. So I'm going to stamp 4 of them with Secret C to read congratulations. I'm going to stamp them a little bit closer to the right hand side. And I purposely chose, I think I mentioned this at the beginning, I purposely chose card design and supplies so that I could make cards in several different or for several different occasions. So I could turn this into a birthday card if I needed some birthday cards. But we're going to make this congratulations and thank you. So then I've chosen the thank you greeting. So, and both the congratulations and the thank you are from Perfectly Pairs. This is also the collection that Laura and I are using for this month's class to go. And I will link to where you can find more information on that class to go in the description below if you're interested. And the cards are a little bit more involved than this simple card that we're making today. All right. Yeah, so these tips are perfect for you, Joan. If you make any kind of cards for any, like if you're mass producing any cards, so even if you're donating the cards, I mean, this is a simple card design that you could use over and over and over. Just switch out the supplies, they'll look completely different. You can do them for so many different occasions. And these tips will come in handy for that for sure. All right. Okay, so now we've done our stamping and what we have to do our assembly, we have to do our ribbon. We'll do that in a minute. Okay, so the other thing, tip number 9, is to invest in tools that save time. So things like a die cutting machine, a stamp platform, a good paper trimmer. A good paper trimmer makes a world of difference. Um, so, and even a good pair of scissors. Our paper snips are great. So anything that will save you time. You don't want to have a hassle when you're mass producing cards. So invest in good tools that save you time. And adhesive is really important as well. Not only in the whole process of making the cards, but also when you gift the card, you don't want your projects falling apart. So adhesive is important. So I like to use our Stampin' Dimensionals, our multi-purpose glue that I put into a fine tip bottle from Amazon, and then our mini glue dots. Those are my 3 favorite types of adhesive. But our seal adhesive is also very good. All right. And then tip number 10 is to keep your tools and your space organized so that you don't waste time for looking for what you need. So once you've designed your cards and you've cut your pieces, I would encourage you then to kind of tidy up your workspace, put everything that you don't need aside, and then start assembling. Okay? All right. So we're going to start assembling here. now that I've talked your ear off. So again, we're going to work in batches. So I'm going to fold all of my card bases because you don't want to create one card at a time. It takes so much longer doing it that way. It's better to do it as an assembly line. All right, so now all of our card bases are folded. Now, let's work on the inside of our cards. So I'm going to take these pieces and I'm going to add these strips. So I'm going to use multi-purpose glue, and I will use a little bit more glue than I normally would just because these pieces are embossed. So I'm going to add all of my strips to the tops or the bottoms of my inside layers. So, and some of them are 1/2 inch, some of them are 3/4 of an inch, but nobody will know the difference because they'll only be getting one of these cards, right? And I've used up my scraps so that I don't have a whole lot of waste. I love this sunflower embossing folder. It's so pretty. And I love that it's 6 by 8. I love these big folders, especially because I'm a scrapbooker. So it's always nice to be able to have like a larger piece with some texture on it. All right. One more here. So you can see how, because I've got all the pieces done, this card is going to come together really, really quickly. Okay. And then we'll add these pieces to the inside. Oh, this one is a little bit long. Let's trim that. Our multi-purpose glue is really good. Like if your project doesn't have a lot of texture, like this layer doesn't have a lot of texture, I don't need a lot of glue. I find if you use a little bit too much multi-purpose glue on your projects, you'll get that kind of funny texture, and it's like your paper is wet. It does dry, but sometimes you can still see those little wrinkles from the moisture from the glue. So just a little bit goes a long way. Adding these in so that we have about an 1/8 of an inch border all the way around. I'll get to the bottom. Take this way. That in there. So who else mass produces cards? And mass production doesn't mean like hundreds of them or even 20 or more. Like if you're making 10 cards, I would call that mass production because you're making multiples of the same card. And like I said, it's a great thing to do if you've got a card designed for many occasions or that will work for any occasion. So this one would make a great birthday card as well. Just keep going here. Uh, don't you still get sticky fingers? Here's another little tip for you. Don't put the adhesive too close to the edge. You can see that I'm not going too close to the edge. It also helps to have one of these fine tip glue bottles, and I'll go back and link to where I found these on Amazon. You don't get a lot of glue that comes out at once. When you use these bottles, I find that sometimes a lot of glue can come out that tips. But I just put this glue inside of these bottles because this glue is fabulous. I just don't like I prefer the thin tip or the fine tip. Oh, this one has a little bit hanging off the edge as well. Okay, so we've got our inside layers done. Now we can start working on the outside. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I will take my embossed pieces, and we're going to add those to the center of the cards. And for this, I will be a little bit more generous with my glue. There's lots of texture on there. So you can see that I've got at least an eighth of an inch all the way around. So my glue isn't all the way to the edge. And that way, when you stick it down, it will spread, um, but it's not going to spread outside of the cardstock. So I will likely finish all six of these cards, and I won't have any glue on my fingers because that's such a great tip is to not put your adhesive too close to the edges. It also gives you a place to hang on to as well. Actually, I think I'm going to turn this way so that we can see that. No, because then this sunflower's upside down. We'll do it this way. All right. So, and I'm just kind of centering these so that that's not very straight or even. So it has an even border side to side and top and bottom. Okay, and we'll just keep going. This one on here. And then we'll do this one. Anybody have any fun plans for the weekend? We've got our team meeting tomorrow morning, so I'm always excited about that. Yeah, I completely agree, Layla. This is such a fabulous tool. Layla says that she doesn't have any problem with it clogging, and you get the perfect amount every time. And it is so true. I do encourage you to put the cap on I mean, it doesn't have to be immediately afterwards, but do want to keep that cap on because the glue can dry out and clog it. But I've only had that problem a couple times, and you can just take a pin and unclog it. But I love it. It holds a lot of glue. It's easy to refill. All right, last one here. If you're a demonstrator and you're working on swaps, all these tips will come in handy as well. All right. Okay, so we've got the front panels on. Now we can work on our greetings here. So I'm going to bring in my silicone mat just because these are smaller pieces and I want to make sure I don't get glue on my glass mat. So I'm just putting a narrow bead of glue down the bottom of this white piece. This is going to go right on here so that we have about an eighth of an inch of that pattern paper showing. Do that on each one of these. So you can see how working in batches really saves you a ton of time. Okay, do the next one. Trying to keep an eye on the comments as well. I, Gretchen, I am using Stampin' Up's multi-purpose glue. I'll show you the green glue, this one here, the Tombow Mono liquid glue that I've just put into this bottle from Amazon. Great. So I'm going to go through the 10 tips again. I apologize for those of you who've been here from the beginning, but for those of you who are just joining in, um, my 10 tips for mass producing cards. Tip number one is to choose a simple design, and you can go back and watch this video for more details of each one of these tips. But you want something that looks good, but it's easy to reproduce. Tip number two is to make one card first, and just to make sure that it is as simple as you think it's going to be, and you can iron out any kinks or make any modifications. Um, I don't know how many times I have designed swaps thinking, oh, this is going to be so simple, and then not made that first one, but just went ahead and completely prepped all the projects and just kicked myself afterwards. They just took too long to make. So I highly encourage you to actually make one just to make sure also that it looks good as well before you start prepping everything. So that was tip number two. Tip number three is to limit your supplies. By limiting your supplies, it means you don't have to have a ton of different things out, and it just makes things simpler. Tip number four, maximize your supplies. And I talked a little bit about more about this, like cutting this piece. This is a 6x8 embossing folder. So we strategically cut it so that we can get four out of one pass through the die cutting machine. Same with using your 12x12 pattern paper. If you're strategic about the way you cut it, you don't have any leftover pieces. So cut it 3x4, 4x4, 2x5, those kinds of sizes. Tip number five is avoid difficult measurements. Stick with something easy. Forget those 1/16 and 1/8 inch measurements. Um, Tip number six is to use pre-cut card bases if you can. And if you don't want to use our note cards and envelopes, um, just cut and score a bunch of them to have on hand for when you sit down. It's a huge time saver. So the colors that you use most often, if you use thick basic white, or if you use crumb cake or black, or if there's colors that you use most often, score a bunch of those, cut and score a bunch of those so that they're ready for you when you sit down to craft. I have a little basket that I keep them in, and I always check that basket first before I cut into another piece of cardstock. So that was, what tip was that? That was tip number six. Tip number seven is to reuse layouts that you've done in the past. So if you find something that is quick and easy that you love, just change out the supplies and reuse that reuse that design. You are not likely to send the same card design to somebody who would even recognize that you've used that card design for a card that you've made for them before. Tip number eight is to work in batches, which is what we're doing right now. So you can see I'm sticking all the dimensionals on the backs of these pieces, and I've done all the cutting and assembling for each stage. Now I'll pick off the backings for all of these. So working in batches like this, assembly line style, rather than one card at a time, saves a huge amount of time. Tip number nine is to invest in good tools. Good tools make a world of difference. So if you've got dies for an image, that saves you a ton of time over having to fussy cut those images. Let's see here, a good paper trimmer, that your tools make a big difference. And tip number 10 is to keep your tools and space organized while you're working so that you don't have to waste time looking for what you need. All right, so now these pieces are going to go across about 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom of or maybe half an inch from the bottom of the embossed panel. And the 4 inches doesn't go all the way across, so there is going to be a little bit of a gap on either side. I will have all of these tips typed up in today's blog post as well, which I'll go back and link in the description when it goes live. It'll go live shortly after I'm finished with this video. All right. Okay. So there are our cards. Now, I really like to add ribbon to my cards, and twine. So I do take the time to do this. So I'm going to share, I pre-did most of them, but I wanted to show you how I did it just because it does take time. But I love the look of it, so I do take the time to do this. Okay, so I took about a 4.5 inch piece of Secrecy ribbon. Love that Stampin' Up! Has products that coordinate. And I've got a piece of white twine, just wrapping it around. So I just fold it in half. And then I'm going to cinch it, like pull it tight. Now, if this is too finicky for you, you can get a similar look by just kind of folding your ribbon in half, using mini glue dots to adhere it to your card, and then tie a bow and putting your bow on top of the ribbon. The main difference for that would be you won't get that cinched look, which I like the cinched look, so I'm gonna wrap it around. So that came loose when I tied it, so I'm just gonna retie it here. So this is definitely something that you could eliminate. So I'm gonna pull in that sketch again, where the sketch that inspired this card, because I wanna share something. So this is the sketch that I'm using, this one here. And so you can see I replaced the oval with the rectangular embossed layer. I've got my strip going across, and then this piece here, which I would likely think that strip going across, you could use DSP or maybe even a strip of ribbon. I've used my cardstock and added my greeting to that. And then this would be for your greeting, but instead I am replacing that piece for the ribbon. Okay, so there's lots of different ways that you can interpret sketches. And that's kind of one of the things that I'll be focusing on this summer with my sketch series, summer sketch series that I'm doing. So you can follow along with that. All right, now we're just going to use mini glue dots and just stick one in the middle and then add our ribbon. And I'll just keep doing this here. Okay, and at this point, you can leave it as is, but I find adding dimensionals, adding embellishments just kind of steps it up again. So we're going to add some embellishments to this, and that will be our final step. I will have to go back and trim some of these pieces of twine. Some of them are really long. So you can see that I've got some that are congratulations, some that are thank you. So that was really the only thing that I changed for each one of these 6 cards. Otherwise, they are exactly the same. All right. So we've done that. Now we're going to bring in some of these low profile sparkle dots. These are also part of the Painterly Pears suite. So the DSP is from that suite. The greetings are from the stamp set, and then these are also from this set. There is a set of dies that goes with this stamp set to create a bundle. And there is some ribbon, which is a mossy meadow and gold ribbon, which we're not using on this card because I chose to go with blue and yellow rather than green and yellow. The other thing is when you're mass producing, if you choose colors where your embellishment package, you could use any color. So I probably wouldn't use the green ones on this, but I have the blue ones and I have the yellow ones. So if I was making a lot of cards, rather than buying multiple packages of my embellishments, I could interchange between the blue and the yellow, and they would both look good on this card. So rather than buying a whole bunch of packages so that I can use just the blue because these 2 colors wouldn't coordinate, that's another thing to keep in mind when you're designing your projects. All right. Okay. So we're going to add 2 of these, a big one and a little one. So again, that stretches the supplies. So I'm not using all big ones or all little ones. I'm using one of each. And I'm using 2 rather than 3. I know I usually use odd numbers, but I find 2 embellishments looks really good. It's just enough to add that little bit of sparkle to the projects. And again, I'll have plenty of these to use. So I don't have to worry about having to buy an extra package of these embellishments. Okay, so I've shared lots of tips on mass producing your cards. in this video. I hope you found them helpful and that when you sit down to make multiple cards the next time, you might think of this video and give it a rewatch. All right, so there we go. We've created 6 cards in, I don't know, how long has this video gone on for? Um, what time is it? It is 10:40. So I talked for probably the first 10 minutes and then started making them. So for probably in probably 30 minutes or less, we've made 6 cards, and then I've had a couple that I pre-did here. So there we've got 8 cards ready to go, decorated both inside and out, and they're stunning. So I hope you guys found those tips helpful. I'm just going to quickly go through. Oh, yes, it is the 4th of July. Happy 4th of July for anybody who's watching from the States. Okay, I want to make sure I answered everybody's questions. Yeah, it looks good. Okay. All right. So have a fabulous weekend. I will have a full supply in the description below, as well as links to like this bottle that I purchased on Amazon and anything else that I may have mentioned. And have, yeah, thanks so much for watching. All right, take care.